We're going to be talking about a key House vote that'll be taking place tomorrow. It's scheduled for tomorrow.
Yep.
And this is on the Epstein Files Transparency Act. This is a bill that resurfaced after the government reopened and had really, they were trying to bypass leadership to get this to a floor vote. They finally got enough signatures on their discharge petition, which allowed them to bypass the leadership calendar for votes and force this to a floor vote. This all comes as the members of the House Judiciary Committee, the Democrat members, released a bunch of documents related to Jeffrey Epstein on the very day the House was voting to reopen the government. This has been something that President Trump, Jordan, has said, can we just let this go away? Why is this consuming so much of our political thought process when there's so much else going on in our country that needs to be addressed?
After the longest shutdown in history,
right.
But yet this is see the politics of it. Democrats fold after their election victories, and they fold without a message on the government shutdown. They get nothing in return, so they have to go to something else. Okay, so those election victories, I think people finally realize New York City and Virginia, that's not like game-changing for any kind of politics or what's coming ahead in the midterm elections at this point. And I think where President Trump was by Friday night is, you know what, I've got to get, as he said in his Truth Social post, I've got to get the Republican Party back on track, back focusing on the economy, delivering for the American people. So if we need to release all these documents so that they can do that, fine. Everybody go and vote this week to release all the documents. So for all that pressure that's been, Donald Trump doesn't want these documents out, or he wants some out but not all of them out. He literally put the message out saying, go, get this vote done, you get it to my desk, we'll sign it if you do, and all the documents will get out, they'll go through the committees, they'll go through the processes, so we can move on.
I think it's also important to look at the context here. Now that Democrats have all of a sudden, after for years mocking Republicans and conservatives that said this is such a conspiracy theory, there's nothing there. Now all of a sudden they're weaponizing it. And honestly, to some degree, that is what tells me that whatever documents there isn't the stuff that people that have been interested in this story are looking for.
Right.
Because one, if there are very powerful people named as clients in some sort of documentation, then how polarizing this story is, that would have been leaked or used against someone because both sides have had power at this point in the timeline of this scandal. So if there was that information and someone had access to it, Washington, D.C. is the hardest place in the world to keep a secret, to actually keep something under wraps. If there was actual evidence of someone in power that had done something, or Jeffrey Epstein had some sort of leverage against these individuals, that I believe would have come out. So I think that there's the question there. We also know that the Trump administration went to court asking for all the grand jury information to be released, and a judge blocked that. So we don't necessarily know what files are here, what they are still, even by this legislation, the Epstein Files Transparency Act, what can come out, because grand jury information, not to protect anyone in this case, but the precedent there of why a judge blocked it when the administration was like, we should get this out there, is because that is a sacred process. Right. And the public, it isn't supposed to be transparent in a way. So that isn't necessarily the judge protecting someone in this case, but is to protect the entire grand jury process, which is a very important thing to preserve in this country. So yes. The Trump administration tried to get that out. That was blocked by a judge. Now we're here. It's been this back and forth kind of political football that I think the president, rightly so, is like, can we be done with this? Can we move on? And if there is something that can come out, if there is something the DOJ could do, then they can do that. Yeah, but why does this have to be dominating our political system when we have a lot of big issues?
Well, this is what's going to be interesting. So once if the votes are actually taking place, and we see kind of how the votes come down and it gets to his desk and he signs it, can really anybody complain anymore?
Right.
No. Now they can go through documents and try to find this and that will take time. But, ultimately the president is the one who greenlighted this, who said, you know what? I don't care how you vote. Just go vote on this, get it to my desk. Let me get all this out. And I think that ultimately that makes it tougher for the left now, because he's saying, I'm not worried about anything in here. And now the left is worried because he's talking about other people's names from the left who are also in there, the Bill Clinton types and others. And he's saying, maybe we'll have, some focus on this too. And then they say, oh, I can't believe he said that. Well, I mean, you're going to dissect all these names. The Democrats will on their committees, the House will on their committees if they do get this kind of tranche of documents, and you're going to find out on both sides of the aisle. The truth is, I'm hoping that this lets us move on so that we can start actually working on legislation and reforming legislation that actually benefits the American voter who got these people elected. This is investigation information.
Right.
And the government is not supposed to release a bunch of people's names if they weren't charged with a crime, but it sullies them. So we have protections against that. Now, Congress, if they believe the oversight is so necessary, that this is so distracting, so important to the American people, that we need to go around that, still try to protect those who are guilty of no crimes, guilty of nothing, while at the same time, I think the president endorsing it, saying, listen, he knows his name is being used by Jeffrey Epstein a lot. So much to the fact that it actually kind of underscores that Jeffrey Epstein looks like he was just spiraling, like we were talking about, writing 1,000 emails about Donald Trump. I mean, just anything to try to get out of the situation his bad actions had got him into. But second is like random people's names we try to protect, not just important people, like, that have no bearing on any wrongdoing here, weren't investigated, but were in one, in some email, in some document, some receipt. Because in America, even with our legal system, we try to protect you from being basically a reputation destroyed by the government without the government actually having to prove that you committed criminal wrongdoing.
And to that point as well, Jordan.
So you don't just release this kind of stuff.
What you brought up.
Then you've also got grand jury information. Remember, that was leaked to committees. Now, again, you've got to have a lot of things pass through Congress, and then it's got to be go through. And most of that is not to protect the politicians, by the way. It's to protect you and me, the citizens who don't have that kind of standing at the federal level.
And why I believe it's the right course of action for it to go through Congress is because I want to preserve that for you, for me, for the entire country, that if for some reason the government or there's the mob rule, everyone knows, first of all, he was convicted of charges before, even though he got a sweetheart deal. Yes. Everyone knows in that sense of what was going on, but the government's burden is still innocent until proven guilty. Yes. They cannot run this campaign of releasing.
Right. This is not a political campaign.
But we can allow Congress to do this, to have a very specific oversight law, and that is what they are doing here. And that's why it is the appropriate way. Instead of just saying, DOJ, give us everything into the public searchable database, because that brings up ethical questions that could affect what happens when it's a political enemy and they just want to sully their name. They did a lot with that with Donald Trump. Yeah. They tried as much as they could. So we have to be careful with our institutions, not for the sake of monsters,
no,
but for the sake of the American people.